I'm a fan of the TV show Ted Lasso. I enjoyed each episode every season, how quotable it is. And one of my favorite quotes from the series is be curious, not judgmental. And it's something that I've, dealt with in my personal life, professional life, where somebody's asking you a question and they know the answer. And so they're not information seeking, they are accusing in question form. And I don't like dealing with that. I don't like having to handle those sorts of questions. But I think sometimes it's fun to be curious and not judgmental. Sometimes you can become judgmental by being curious. And the reason I bring up be curious, not judgmental is because when you have that mindset of being curious, wondering, questioning, asking, you can kind of start to see things between the lines or get in your head maybe some ulterior motives, etc. And one of the things I'm questioning right now is, does the Big Ten have ulterior motives in fighting for and angling for more spots in the college football playoff alongside the SEC than the ACC and Big 12? Supposedly, the 14-team playoff is going to be finalized sometime very soon, and the Power 5 conferences and Notre Dame are going to be in agreement on what the structure is. And when you put that in your head of the Power 4 conferences, I guess I should say, Power 4 conferences and Notre Dame are going to be in agreement, that brings up some curiosity. Is the Big Ten using the SEC as a shield? Because I think you could argue that the Big Ten has ulterior motives in this situation, where if you ask yourself just off the top, okay, what do the Big Ten and SEC get out of having more guaranteed spots and, in their wishes, more guaranteed buys in the college football playoff? Well, one, they get more teams into the college football playoff, which is an inherently good thing for those two brands as a whole. And it's an inherently good thing for the member schools of those two brands. Undeniable. Two, and it all goes back to, like, I think sometimes people argue that, people are driven by power, which is, I think, true at some point, but you have to get something out of that power, right? Generally, it's greed. Generally, it's money. You are motivated to get more money. So the Big Ten and SEC are motivated to get more money out of the college football playoff. How do they do that? They guarantee more access for their teams into that dance, into that party. And when that party is handing out millions of dollars to people who come through the door, you want to make sure you've got more people coming through that door. So that makes logical sense that the Big Ten and SEC want what's best for their teams, and then also financially want what's best for their teams and themselves. But the long-running thought process in Notre Dame has stuck by this, that they will not join a conference until or unless their current TV rights deal puts them behind the eight ball, where they're not in the same financial stratosphere as the other power players in college football. And two, as long as they still have access and a pathway to win the national championship. So much so that they're willing to look past the idea that the top 4 slots in the 12-team playoff were going to be reserved for conference champions. Therefore, the best Notre Dame could ever be seeded was number 5, and they were okay with that. But if we ever got to that situation that we've talked about before on the podcast of the SEC and Big Ten taking their ball, going home and saying, you know what, to hell with the college football playoff, we're going to have our own little tournament over here on the side, and it's going to matter more than the college football playoff. It's going to be the de facto national championship of college football. Well, then Notre Dame's hand is forced. And in your mind, do you picture Notre Dame becoming a member of the SEC or a member of the Big Ten? It's a pretty simple thought. So Is the Big Ten working in conjunction with the SEC in a best of both worlds scenario where either the options are we tag team partner with this huge entity over here, and I'm in a win-win situation. Either I get the amount of teams that I want into the college football playoff, a guaranteed slot with whatever else I want, because we can team up, go do something over here. Or if we're forced to team up and go do something over here, does that force Notre Dame inside my conference, which leads to increased revenue for everybody in the Big Ten? I don't think it's unreasonable to question whether or not the Big Ten is looking at this going, because supposedly, they've got a cap. We're only going to take 20 teams. We're only going to do 20, which I think is ridiculous. At worst, they're going to stop at 24 if/when the ACC implodes, and they'll take Cal, Stanford, Notre Dame, Florida State, probably Georgia Tech, and like North Carolina or Virginia. And then the SEC might scoop up some of the other remnants. But don't be surprised if at some point that 18-team conference becomes 24. You get a bunch of 6-team divisions in that. That's another topic for another day. If you are the Big Ten, can you see a scenario where if you play your cards right, Notre Dame is forced to join your conference? The answer to that question is unequivocally yes. That you can see that path. And if you play your cards right, now you have to play them right because Notre Dame has their own set of cards, but you know what's important to Notre Dame: financial stability, financial competitiveness, and access to the national championship. You hold the cards to one of those things. But when both of those things matter to the athletic department, the administration, the university, their fan base, the coaching staff, both of those things matter. It's not just we will stay independent as long as we're still making money, or we'll stay independent as long as we can win a national championship. It's both. They are tied together. And if you can separate one of them, if you can take one of them away, it's somewhat malpractice to not do that, correct? Because it is 100%, whether the fan bases will accept it immediately or not, it is 100% in the Big Ten's best interest to have Notre Dame join the conference. You cannot argue otherwise. From a perception standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, from a rivalry standpoint, we need to find as many big games as possible to produce for our television partners, from a competitive standpoint, from a brand standpoint, from an academic standpoint. It makes all of the sense in the world for the Big Ten to want Notre Dame in the conference. Now, so far, Notre Dame hasn't reciprocated those feelings. But if their hand is forced and they have to join one of the 4 current ships that are still available, Big Ten, SEC, ACC, or Big 12, which one do you think they're doing? Now, the natural response is they've already got a relationship with the ACC. Does the ACC feel like a ship that is floating on top of the water right now with no potential perils in sight? No, it does not. And I think it's probably a bit much to argue that the Big Ten is operating solely under the idea that, we'd be willing to torpedo the ACC to get Notre Dame into our conference. I don't think it's that deep. I don't think that, the Big Ten is having their lawyers pilfer through the ACC grant of rights to find a way to get Florida State out of that conference, because the first time somebody figures out the way out of that contract before 2036, that thing is going down like the Edmund Fitzgerald. It is out of here. See ya. Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn to minutes to hours? It's gone and vanished like a fart in the wind. And Notre Dame and some of the other schools in that conference will immediately bolt to the Big Ten and the SEC. Don't be surprised if there aren't already somewhat contingent offers out there of, hey, Miami, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Virginia, Clemson. Things go south for you. We've got the framework going here if you want. Don't be surprised if. But I just think there could be an ulterior motive there in how the Big Ten is swinging that thing around in negotiations. Because if you can get to that win-win scenario, and if Notre Dame doesn't join the conference, you're still good. Like if you don't get, I don't think getting Notre Dame to join the Big Ten is the priority. I think the Big Ten is prioritizing access to the college football playoff and money. But money is grown in a couple of different ways. One, guaranteed spots into the college football playoff. You get your cut of that revenue. And then two, if you can bring Notre Dame into the fold and you're not up against a time crunch by any stretch of the imagination, you just signed rights deals, you get you $1 billion a year. But that's the next step to expanded revenue for the Big Ten, is adding a program like Notre Dame. And don't mistake it for 1 second that if the Big Ten can get that done, if they can get that horse in the barn, there will be hard chest thumping to the point of bruising, because there are several schools inside the conference that want it and know that it's a natural fit and know what a financial windfall it would be for their universities to make that happen. Be curious, not judgmental. I'm curious of whether or not the Big Ten is sort of hiding behind a shield with the SEC to say, we want the same thing. We are both working under the same guise, that we want as many access points to the college football playoff. And then when you get behind that shield a little bit and go, and by the way, if we do this right, the prize pig is going to be in our barn. They're not going to balk at that either. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all that great college football content that we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening to the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you on Sunday here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.